So last night was Super Tuesday, and I think progressives had a realization that we were worried about as soon as Pete Buttigieg dropped out and Amy Klobuchar dropped out of the presidential primary. Elizabeth Warren needs to drop out of the Democratic primary if we want our progressive agenda to be passed. Now, I'm not saying Elizabeth Warren should drop out. I'm not telling Elizabeth Warren to drop out. I'm saying that if this agenda that we have, tuition-free public colleges and universities, a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, if we want these things to pass and actually have someone fighting for them in the White House, Elizabeth Warren would need to drop out. There's no chance of either Bernie Sanders going into the White House or Elizabeth Warren going into the White House if both of them stay in. Look back to the first three contests of the Democratic primary: Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. One of the reasons that Bernie did so well in these states was because the centrist vote, the moderate vote, was being divided by all of the moderates. Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, they all split up the moderate vote. And while the progressive vote was being split up by Sanders and Warren, there were more moderates in the race at that time. So in a multi-person race with more people on the moderate side and less people on the progressive side, one of the progressives was able to come out on top. The moderates, the traditional Democrats have all consolidated behind Joe Biden. Looking at the Super Tuesday results, Elizabeth Warren is poised to come in third or fourth in all 14 of the races, and that includes her home state. That includes that. That's embarrassing. To lose your home state. And the reason she lost her home state was, again, because the progressive vote is being divided between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. All the conservative vote is mostly behind Joe Biden. All of it. Some of it's going to Bloomberg, but most of it's going to Joe Biden. In my heart of hearts, I know that if Elizabeth weren't in the race, a lot of the people currently supporting Elizabeth Warren would go and support Bernie Sanders because they share very similar agendas. Twitter is one story. Twitter, you have there are people that are never Bernie who are Warren supporters. You have Bernie Sanders supporters who are never Warren. But in the real world, when you talk to people, a lot of Warren supporters' second choice is Bernie Sanders. We need that progressive wing to support us going forward in the primary if we hope to win. We're not going to win. It's clear. Joe Biden wiped the floor with us in Super Tuesday. We need to consolidate the progressive vote. And the only way to consolidate the progressive vote is if Elizabeth Warren is not in the race any longer. People might be thinking, well, why doesn't Bernie Sanders drop out? Because Bernie's in the lead right now. Okay? We have actual votes to support this. It's a different story back last year when people said that we should consolidate behind Elizabeth Warren because she's leading in the polls. Now we have actual factual evidence right now that shows Bernie Sanders in the lead. And when Super Tuesday is all said and done, he'll probably be a little short of Joe Biden, with Elizabeth Warren in a distant third. As things stand right now, Joe Biden is in the early 300s for delegates. Bernie Sanders is mid to late 200s in terms of delegates. And Elizabeth Warren has 28 delegates. She only has 2 more delegates than Pete Buttigieg, and Pete Buttigieg dropped out of the race a few days ago. As it looks right now, Elizabeth Warren has no signs of dropping out of the race. She just sent out a funding email last night asking for more fundraising, asking people to donate to her campaign. And I'm going to call this right now. If Elizabeth Warren stays in this race, Bernie Sanders won't win. And if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. And if Joe Biden's the nominee, Donald Trump will trounce him in November. We will get 4 more years of Donald Trump if Joe Biden is the nominee. We need to unite. And this is a plea to Warren supporters to come join us. Come into the fold and support the progressive frontrunner if you care about these policies being enacted. And I have a feeling that a lot of Warren supporters at this point see the writing on the wall. They see that Elizabeth Warren has no chance. She has no path to the nomination right now without a brokered convention. And that's a whole different story. That's a whole different story. In terms of coming into the convention with the plurality of delegates, if Warren is still in the race through to the convention, Bernie Sanders 100% will not have a plurality of delegates. Joe Biden will. And the person who has the plurality of delegates, the most votes coming into the convention, and this is something I've always said, should be the winner. That person should get the nomination if they have the most votes. If Elizabeth Warren is still in the race by the convention, Bernie Sanders has no chance of having plurality. 0. We'll get 4 years of Trump, and even if you think that Joe Biden wins the nomination and beats Trump, we're not going to pass any progressive policies. Joe Biden barely supports legalizing marijuana, if he even does, if he even truly supports that. Joe Biden wrote the crime bill. Joe Biden is in cognitive decline, I'm sorry to say. Joe Biden has no chance and will not pass any sort of progressive policies. So I'm saying this with all the best intentions. I think Elizabeth Warren ran a historic campaign. I think she did a great job at, gathering grassroots support for the time that she did. But it's time to unite. Just like the conservatives did, the moderates. They all saw that they had no chance of getting a moderate to the Democratic nomination if they were all splitting the vote. And they consolidated behind Joe Biden. We need to do that, and we need to do it behind Bernie Sanders if we want to pass the progressive agenda that we have in mind. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think that Bernie Sanders has any chance at the nomination if Liz Warren stays in the race? Do you think that progressives should unite behind Bernie Sanders? Or if you disagree and think that progressives should unite behind Elizabeth Warren, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts, any disagreements or agreements. We are on Twitter, at PathForwardYT. That's at PathForwardYT. And if you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel already, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on the progressive revolution that we would like to enact.